Alrighty. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another edition of One Plus One, your place for inconvenient truth telling and myth busting. And on this edition of One Plus One, it's another one of our All Things Africa edition. And we are joined by Marion Transetti, who is the coordinator of World Beyond War's Senegal chapter. And yeah, we're here to talk all about what's going on in Africa and what World Beyond War is doing to try to advance the peace movement. So first of all, Marion, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, and hopefully the internet is going to be with us as
Exactly.
well.
Fingers crossed and knock on wood. Manu, it's a real honor to have you on. And my first question, Marion, before we talk about Senegal, Djibouti, AFRICOM, and some of those issues, is just tell us a bit about your background and how you got involved in the peace movement, particularly in Africa. Well, particularly in Senegal and Africa, but yeah.
Yeah. The peace movement has been in my life forever. Even as a kid, I was already, in the schoolyard. I was the one that people were coming to tell everything and to ask for, mediate what was happening there.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's in me. It's my DNA, I think. Then I've been for a long time with Amnesty International. And after that, I moved 4 years ago. I came to Africa, and here in Africa, Amnesty International is really not. It doesn't work, like we know it in Canada or North America or Europe. There is no these groups and this letter signing. It doesn't exist. So I was a little bit left with nothing. I didn't know how to go on my work. And so I was following World Beyond War for years already. And I just asked, I say, do you have a chapter in Senegal? And they said, no. I said, okay, here we go. And this is how it started. But I also have to add that when I arrived in Senegal, which was just 7-8 months ago, Ousmane Sonko has just been jailed, and so there were riots everywhere in Dakar. And I just arrived in this, so the urgency was there. I say, okay, I need to do something, because generally the country is kind of calm and quiet, but I arrived in the middle of cars burning in the streets. And so this is why I decided to create the chapter.
Okay. And are you originally from an African country, or what's your background, in that respect?
No, I was born and raised in France. Then after that, I moved to Canada. I have the both citizenship because I've lived the same amount of time in France and in Canada.
Quebec, I
But
assume,
Africa,
or
sorry,
in Quebec, I assume, or
not all the time. I arrived in Quebec, then I moved to Vancouver, and at the end I was in Toronto.
Interesting. Okay.
But even if I was in France and Canada, through my family, I was always connected with Africa. I came to Africa at a very young age because my uncle and aunt are in Ivory Coast, and my uncle is from there. So there were a lot of exchange already with Africa. And somewhere I knew that I would be back at some point, and so here I am.
Okay, fantastic. And that's a fascinating story. And funny enough, my second question is actually related to what you were talking about, how when you started a World Beyond War chapter, there was already a pretty volatile political crisis that was going on in Senegal. So my second question is I was wondering if you could tell our audience what's been happening in Senegal the past year or so, because I understand because if I understand correctly, a French Western-backed government has been fairly repressive towards a pretty broad opposition. I mean, so what can you tell us about what's been going on in Senegal?
It's it's the usual electoral political game. So the previous president was there. Elections are coming in February 2024. And so, of course, there were opposition. And so everything was going supposedly democratically. But suddenly they find that he had an affair with a masseuse in a salon somewhere, and it was not blah, blah, blah. I didn't know how it is, and it became huge. And so he was accused of many things. But I smell because it was really obvious, that it was completely makeup, but it worked, and he ended up in jail. So, and this is when I arrived.
And this was the opposition leader, or?
Yeah, Ousmane Sonko, yeah,
Okay.
from Ziguinchor, and he was running for president. And he has been released a few days ago, and he could be president, but he will probably ask someone else to be there. But yeah, so this is the first point, I think, which is extremely important when we talk about Africa. We talk about democracy, but we always have to remember that democracy has been brought by the colonizer. And personally, I think that democracy is not a fit for Africa. There is other ways to do in Africa. And so even if in Senegal we're in a democracy, elections are not a joke, but they are not. And in some other in some other countries, if you look at, you have people with this title for 20 years, or even more than that in certain country. Some others are dictators, but they came through democracy, but still they're still dictators. So yeah, I think if in the conversation we're going to talk about democracy in Africa, we have to be very careful with the word, because it doesn't mean that much around here, and we really need to reset that.
Okay, so right now in Senegal has a lot of the violence and clashes between pro-government folks and pro-opposition folks. Has that sort of calmed down a bit, or?
Yeah, totally. This is another thing about Senegal. As you know, it's called the Teranga country. Teranga meaning live together in peace, and it's really in their DNA. So when it started, I was just arriving, and I was a little bit scared, of course. And my Senegalese friends say, "Don't worry, it's going to stop in 3 days." I said, "Really? I mean, they're burning everything," and it did. It stopped after 3 days because they don't have this in them. They are not. They don't like that, and there is always this thing that the person you're fighting against can be your brother, your uncle, your father, and so they do it because they have something to say, but it doesn't last. So this is I think why Senegal is so stable. I mean, not completely, but more stable that maybe that some other country, is that it's really not in them, to go to fight.
Alrighty. Hopefully things will get much better, and hopefully that there won't be any flare-ups of violence, and and some of the opposition folks are released from jail and so forth. But yeah, thank you for enlightening us about that. And now tell us about World Beyond War. World Beyond War's Africa campaign to get military bases out of Djibouti, and tell us whatever you can about the country. Why are there so many multiple military bases? And then I have two follow-up questions, but first talk to us about that.
Closing military base is a mission of World Beyond War globally. And so here in Africa, we have a very good example with Djibouti, who is, it's about the size of Haiti. It's really a very, very small country in Africa, and there is 8.
The Horn of Africa, right?
Yes, in the Horn, absolutely. And there is 8 military bases there. United States of America is there, China, Germany, I think, Italy, Spain. I mean, all these bases are there. Why? Because it's a strategic position. It's just at the east, so it's close to the Middle East, and this is a very good place to be. And also, it's just near this corridor where so they can check what is going there, because there is a lot of piracy in this. All the shipment goes through that place, so there is an economical and a military point for them to be there. And so it brings, of course, like everywhere in the world, when you have a military base, and when you have 8 in such a small place, it brings all kind of issues for young girls and women. Of course, there is a lot of assaults and aggression. There is this tension who is there all the time, and there already been a fight between China and US, and there is if we speak about environment, this is not good as well. And to explain that, I always tell the story of, you're at your place, you rent a flat, and you are near a beautiful river, and someday some people come with ammunition and weapon, and they just put their thing in your living room, and they say, yeah, we are watching on the other side, but they are here. And so they're gonna put all their garbage around here. All your daughters or sisters around are gonna be very uncomfortable, and some things might happen, and you're not at your place anymore. And on top of that, you don't get anything out of it, because the money they pay, it's to your landlord. It's what is happening in Djibouti. The government is very happy with that, because this is billions of dollars every year in their pocket. But the people, nothing. On the index of poverty, Djibouti is, I think, 8th rank before the end. It's extremely poor, but the government has all these rents coming in their pocket. So this is why we want to do something about Djibouti. And the campaign is called Get Your Troops Out of Djibouti.
And that's unbelievable. And can you talk about, actually, can you expand more on the negative impacts these foreign military bases have had on human rights? You already sort of alluded to the fact that a lot of these foreign troops have been abusing women and so forth. Can you talk a bit more about that and some of the other horrendous human rights abuses that that these foreign military bases have had on Djibouti?
I mean, yes, of course, the women situation is really, really concerning, and but there is also, as I said, it's such a small country, so you can imagine with the room that they take, so there is no room left for the people just to farm or to build their own house, or everybody is like squeezed it somewhere in some slum, let's say the word.
Wow.
And the base are all over the country, because you have 8, and you know how it is, there is a ground around for the exercise and everything. And so and they are not compensated for that. They come and they take the place they need. And so this is another right violation, the right to property.
That's unbelievable. And can you talk about some of the environmental impacts that has had on Djibouti? Because we know that that the U.S. military, but also militarism in general, is one of the leading causes of climate change. So I was wondering if you could talk a bit more about how that's impacted Djibouti's environments.
If we talk about, this is really general about all military base, but they have to exercise and everything. So all the trees who are there, all the animals who are there, everything goes. And they don't plant new trees and grass after they leave, and in this case they don't have any intention to leave. So all this is gone, and it's really near to the water. So you can imagine everything going to the water. So yeah, it's the same for every military base. It's no good for, and you know, if you think of all the exercise they do, everything goes in the air. So and just imagine, if you imagine one base in a remote place, that's something, but you have 8 in something big like Haiti. I mean, they're really, you know, back to back. So
Wow.
this is
Wow, that's
crazy.
that yeah, I mean that is crazy. And what has and has there been a lot of grassroots you know domestic resistance in Djibouti against all of against these multiple, as you mentioned, these multiple military bases, you know, in the country?
No, no, because if someone says something, they go to jail or they get killed. The information I have them from someone who moved to Canada and I'm in touch with, because underground, it's the law of silence. If you start talking, you're gonna, I mean, with all this military around, you're gonna get killed. You know, oh yeah, it was an exercise. Oh, we killed him or her. Oh, that was a mistake. You know how it is. And this is so easy because there are so many around. So everybody just
Wow,
shut up.
that's wow, that's unbelievable. So so kind of like in because I know World Beyond War and a lot of people who are involved in, you know, in the peace movement, the anti-war movement, the anti-imperialist movement. I know, for example, in Okinawa, Japan, there's been a lot of horrendous human rights abuses that U.S. military personnel have engaged in towards the you know towards the citizens, but nobody has ever been prosecuted because technically once you have a military base, it's kind of like an embassy. You know, you can't you know the people, you know, the government of Djibouti, even if it wanted to, can't prosecute military personnel who have committed human rights abuses. And then within the whole military courts, which has been a complete failure, it's just, as you mentioned, the level of impunity. So that's been going on a lot in Djibouti with these multiple military bases, whether it's the Spanish military, the German military, the American, French, and even the Chinese military. Then,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You just summarized what is going on there. And but as you can understand, nobody really dare to say anything because everybody has some interest in what's going on there. So yeah, it's like everybody closed their eyes on Djibouti because we can imagine that if one base goes, the other are gonna be asked to go as well. So everybody just, it's status quo. We hear, and but the US wanted to go just near, I think, in the Somaliland, but it's not internationally recognized, so they stay. And yeah, it's just, we just don't talk about it.
wow, that's unbelievable. And then so then actually, so talk to us more then about what World Beyond War is doing to try to close these multiple military bases in Djibouti.
So we just started the campaign. So this is a petition that people can find on worldbeyondwar.org for Djibouti, and we basically ask the government to get their troops out of Djibouti. And we're going to have more media cover like we are doing today. And at World Beyond War, there is also a lot of information and education that we do, because it's not the only things happening on African soil, and there is many things that people are not aware of. So Djibouti is, I would say, the center of this huge campaign to tell the rest of the world that Africa is not their playground, because it has been since ever. They needed some people, they came with slavery. After that, they needed resources, they came with colonization, and they are still here economically. They left maybe, but they're still here economically. And now we see this Russian Chinese interest coming, investing, sending men in Africa. Why? It's not out of philanthropy, of course. So yeah, I think the main message here is to say, if the rest of the world could give a break to Africa, that would be just fine.
Fantastic. And that's actually a perfect segue to this, which is, can you tell us about the resistance to AFRICOM in Africa, and which countries have been the most resistance to the building of AFRICOM, and why do you think that is? Why one nation more than the other nation when it comes to resistance to AFRICOM?
That's a tricky question because I don't know exactly which country has position. You know, I've just been in Nigeria, Ivory Coast, and Senegal, so I wouldn't want to say some things that unverified.
Okay, yeah, no problem. but but can you tell us? But can you tell us if there has been a lot of resistance in Africa to to AFRICOM?
Where I was, not that much. Yes, the answer is yes, but not as we could expect it to be. It's it's always in Africa, every time you do something, the safety question comes right away. Because in Africa, you can disappear just like that. You go to buy some bread and you never come back. It's still like this very much in many
Wow.
countries. So, like at the moment with Gaza, there is so much everywhere in the world, but very little in Africa. And it's not that people don't care. It's just that you can go in the streets of a country in Africa and just say, I'm against the genocide, and right away you're gonna be jailed and probably way more than that. So I think it explains why the resistance is there, but there is no display of it more than that.
That it's interesting that you say that, because I think it also goes to show why it's vitally important that people outside of Africa, not and I'm not and we don't want sort of like the kind of like Western savior complex, but it sounds like what you're saying does show how important it is to have the peace movement, whether it's in France, whether it's in Canada, whether it's in the US, to mobilize against the ongoing scramble for Africa, colonization of Africa, and elsewhere in the world, right?
Yes, but it has to be done with a lot of care, very carefully, because when it happens, it's so easy to slip to, we're going to come to help you. We're going to, and very, very quickly, we're going to tell you how to do it. And, and this is something, of course, that Africans don't want. And they know exactly how to do it. It's just that they can't because of the structure, because of the system around here, but they know exactly how to do it. So when people, because I'm a white woman in a Black country, so I face this kind of conversation almost every day. And the way I explain it, it's Africa has been knocked out with colonization, and it's coming back. But Africa is in the ring. Africa is going to go for the fight. It's nobody else. All these people who say, oh, we're going to help Africa, Russia, China, this is bullshit. I mean, Africa has to leave this fight, and we, Westerners, supporting it. This is what we are, supporters. We are all around. And we say, go, Africa, go, 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 do it. We support you. Because at the moment, even African people, a lot of them are waiting for the West or the North to tell them if it's okay. Or, they're always waiting for approbation just because they have been doing that for decades. And so, this is the self-confidence of Africa that has to come back. And we have to be there to tell them that, yes, you can. Yes, it's go, go, go. You know what you do. You know better than anybody else. And so if the West want to support Africa, it's like this. And it's not always super easy to secure that. There is often some things, some speeches who tend to say, okay, I'm going to tell you what to do. This is the heritage,
Interesting, and actually talk to us then a bit, a bit more about how people from outside of Africa can actually be more constructive, can be more helpful in. How can I say this? How so if you were to talk to Western audiences, and how would you say to them, okay, if you want to help, it's good that you want to be a constructive partner in helping out Africa, but this is how you can help out Africa by doing, this or that. So talk a bit more about that, so that we don't fall into the whole kind of like Western savior complex, and go in with with this is how y'all should organize, and and whatnot.
Absolutely. I think I would say go for the head. This is, when you're on a fight, go for the head, because issues in Africa are related to governments. They are not related to the people. I mean, the people, they work hard, they are very creative, they are extremely educated, and, so there is no problem there. But the governments are still, working with the bad boys. And so I would say, and this is why we started the Djibouti campaign, because if you're in the US, you can sign and have it signed, because at some point it's going to deliver to your government. If you're in China, you can do the same. If you're in France, you can do the same. If you're in Germany, I mean, there is 8 countries. So we want this really to, to grow. And when we're going to be ready with the media, and at the same time, simultaneously, we're going to deliver this petition in 8 countries, 8 governments who are using Africa as their playground. So I would say, so this is the Djibouti example, but if you want to help Mali, just have a look at the gold in Mali. Mali could be so great, but just look at the figures. All the gold goes to France, and France has all this Malian gold with them, and Mali is still in extreme poverty. So if you're in France, go to your government and tell them to stop taking all the gold from Mali. And we can go, if you take any country in Africa, a way or another, it's related to the ex-colonizer, which are still the colonizer economically.
Yeah.
and just go for this head. They are the one that have to go down if we want to give a chance to Africa.
I completely agree with you. And my second to last question I wanted to ask you is, Africa, sadly has been plagued by civil wars, and if it's not civil wars, it's wars between it's wars that go on between nation to nation. And you talked about the nail on you hit the nail in the head, which is also Western imperialism has also been behind much of Africa's woes, and sometimes even these civil wars and these intra-conflicts, a lot of that also is related to Western imperialism. And I do believe, in the mission of World Beyond War, which is that we need to end all forms of warfare. But and of course, I've also participated, moderating debates with World Beyond War when we talk about are wars ever justifiable? But do you think, when we talk about, Western imperialism, that's, that some wars are justifiable, such as an African country, resisting, military occupation, or an African country, resisting colonialism or neo-colonialism, and trying to, get rid of their occupiers. And I know, coming, my mother comes from the Congo, and we have a problem with, Rwandan proxies and Ugandan proxies and Western-backed proxies in Congo. And I would love if the Congolese military would just, evict these people. So I'm curious. So I'm curious. Long story short, aren't some wars justifiable? When we talk about overthrowing imperialism, and I'm curious. Your response. Your response to that. Big question,
thank you.
But
but I'm going to answer you taking an angle that we haven't talked about yet, and it's terrorism, because it's a new reason for military to come in Africa. Because yes, there is the territory dispute in many countries, and there is also the climate change brings some other issues, because with the territories, the access to the water. And so this is true, it exists in Africa, and with or without the West, it would exist. But before the 9/11, there were a report saying that in West Africa, where I am, and I know better this part of Africa, there have been 9 terrorist attacks, 9 in a year. And because of the 9/11, United States of America said, oh, but we know that the terrorists, the Muslim terrorists, have some views on these big areas in Africa, so we need to go there. And they came, but nobody, not much people know that. Even some congressmen and women don't know that. They came, and they have commandos, and they have drones. And last year, this year, 2023, because we're almost done, there is about 1,007 terrorist attack in Africa. So it's 75,000% more than before they came. And this is something relatively new in Africa, because it was not, there were like ethnic issues, territory issues, there is for the resources, of course, and there is the war against the colonizer. But terrorism in Africa, that was not a topic, but now it is. And thanks to the war to terror that decided that Africa was threatened, there were already terrorism in Africa, after with the Libya situation and, the Tuaregs, and it was there. It didn't come out of nowhere, but it has been extremely amplified in just 2 decades. So yeah, this is a way to answer your question. Because we don't talk very often about that. We don't that often put Africa and terrorism together. Terrorism or the Middle East, But yeah, in Africa, we are facing that now as well.
But I think the reason why you were explaining that to me in the audience, I think if I understand correctly, is that U.S. I would call it U.S. imperialism, U.S.-led imperialism, but that is what brings all the instability and the crisis in Africa.
Yeah,
terrorism, which was almost of non-existent. Yes, there were civil wars. There were conflicts between countries like Ethiopia and Somalia. So that existed, and that was horrendous. But the whole spontaneous terrorism, that we see, that's something completely brand new. And the West claiming that they're helping out Africa in fighting terrorism, they've actually been creating more terrorism, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And so if we think about everything we've said, with Africa military on African soil, having these commandos and this war on terror going on, and Russia and China investing a lot. And it's going further than just investing economically. You know, they're sending men. Some people said ex-convict, but it's not verified yet. But they're sending these men, these workers, who are marrying African women. It's in Zimbabwe mostly, but in many countries. So they get the citizenship. They're going to have kids. And so there is this new colonization, I mean, new invasion, I don't know how to call it, you know, coming from that side. And there is a United States who say, yes, we have the right to be there because it's the war on terror. And can you imagine in a few years, all these people and 8 military bases in Djibouti? It doesn't look good. It's scary. It's scary. And this is why I say Africa is not your playground. Just get the hell out of here. Because the USA, they are very good to be involved in many conflicts all over the world, except on their own soil. And now they're going to come and do that in Africa. So yeah, this is the situation in Africa at the moment, and it's scary to see these two things coming, and the government complicit in a way or another for that. So this is why we're here in Africa, World Beyond War. There is a lot to do.
Then, but then make the case why. But then make the case why you think nonviolence and ending conflicts nonviolently is a better way forward for Africa. Because I'm sure you probably have conversations with, you know, Pan-Africanists, pan-revolutionary leftist Africans who say that, look, I completely agree with you that we do need to end war as an institution, but surely the only way to get rid of French colonialism, American colonialism, or any kind of colonialism is through, you know, violence and so forth. So make the case why if we want to see a world without war, we have to go. You know, why, you know, you advocate, you know, that we should end it through non-violent means as opposed to, yeah, you know, fighting violence with violence.
Yeah. I think my previous answer was probably scary and maybe pessimistic, but there is some bright future here in Africa because the population is very young. And some of them hasn't known, we are already in the next generation, hasn't known firsthand the colonization. It was their parents or grandparents. And so we are at the moment when the shift is possible. If you come with some nonviolent movement, they jump in. Yeah, you know, the young people, World Beyond War, Senegal, it's 99% of young people, 20-ish, you know, and because they want to do something, but yeah, they have seen what violence has done in their families, and so they want some other ways. And so this is why at the moment we can't do that. And excuse me.
Sure, no problem. Yes, so continue with what you were saying.
So yes, I think really the future of Africa is in the youth. And I know it sounds like this big you know, slogan you say, and but this is really true, and they are really pushing for that. And in all the country I have visited, and they are a little fearless, and I mean, with the meaning of this word when you're in an African country, but they don't want to go to the confrontation. So they are looking for other means. So that's when we can arrive and say, there is some other way, there is some non-violent ways to do that. And there is already in Africa some very good examples. If you take Liberia, Sierra Leone, where if you know a little bit what happened there, the women have taken the lead on that, and one of them is now at the head of the country, and they have just been doing sitting. They have this sex strike that was a tool very, very efficient in what they do. And they have been to...
If I can interrupt, a sex strike.
Yeah, exactly. You can Google that. It's what happened. Yeah,
okay.
yeah, absolutely. They just the started of this story was that Muslim women and Christian women decided to come together, saying if we come together, we're going to be a power, a counter power for sure. So they started with some sitting. And in these countries, if you threat someone to get naked, it works. And so it's what they did, because they did against police. And they were still there, but it was not enough. They were still not received by the government. So they decided to go into a sex strike, and for many months, they refused all sexual relationship with their husband. And they say, no, we don't do that anymore until you listen to us. And it was a mean of pressure that worked a lot, because bit by bit, men were also saying, okay, yeah, there is a problem. And so this is some nonviolent example that we don't talk about. We see, oh, there is just conflicts in Africa. No, there is also some very creative ways, nonviolent ways to do things. So yeah, this is an example of what we can do.
Would you say that the Africans and would you say that the Africans that you work with, some from Senegal, and I assume some who aren't from Senegal, they might be from from other African countries, that their advocacy of non-violence as a way to end the chronic violence and the intergenerational violence and also the intergenerational trauma that comes with all of that is because they're just fed up with that they're just fed up with the violence, and because even if whatever because I know when we talk about conflicts in Africa, even countries which might be completely in the right to do what they're doing, so say overthrowing French imperialism or fighting against whatever invader, that the problem with violence is that it leads always to just this to an endless cycle of violence, and therefore a lot of the people who get involved in World Beyond War or get involved in or get involved in nonviolent movements is their way of just wanting to end this cycle of endless warfare and endless violence, because as you were kind of trying to because as you were explaining with the war on terror, it always just leads to just more and more and more and more violence, and therefore it has to stop at some point, and therefore your advocacy of nonviolence is that way of of just ending war as an institution and war as a practice, right?
Exactly. This is why I started this interview saying the world has to give a break to Africa, because all this violence is brought in Africa, despite the fact that African countries are very good at restorative justice. They are very good at reconciliation. It's in their culture, and there is a lot of people working to amplify that. But in many countries, there is the peace organization having this conversation with the whole community, and these people coming in front of the village, in front of others, and saying, yes, I did wrong. I was in the militia. I killed people. And there is this way of restoration, and so Africa is excellent as that. So ending the cycle of violence, Africa can do that. There is no problem. This is really something that is happening everywhere in Africa when Africa is given the chance to do it. But what we see at the moment is that one is also France go by this door and the US come the other door, or or US go this door and China come to the other door. So this is why we say stop, just get out of Africa, because Africa has been knocked out by colonization. They're coming back. Africa is coming back, saying, "Okay, give us a second just to clear our head," and they are doing that very actively. But yeah, it has to stop. The invasion, whatever look it takes, has to stop, and it doesn't. And this is what is very, very concerning and scary.
Fantastic. Just actually, just before I get to this question, is there anything else you want to say, as we wrap up this conversation? Yeah, anything else you want? Yeah, anything else you want to say to our audience? As we wrap this conversation up.
Maybe I would make a reading suggestion it's a book by Wangari Maathai, who has received a Nobel Peace Prize a decade ago. And she wrote this book called Unbowed, and it's about what she did in Kenya. And she's a woman, and she started by planting trees. The very beginning of her movement was to plant trees. It was about climate change, and it became a human and peace movement, the Green Belt movement. And she did all that by using only non-violent means. And she did that all her life. And I think it's a proof, if needed, of the strength of Africa and Africa women. And it's a guide to non-violence activism. So read it, and you will have some keys. And if for the Western audience, I would just come back to what I said. We are supporter. We are not coach or whatever. We are just supporter. And what Africa needs at the moment is just us to tell them, yes, you can. Just do it. You have everything. So just do it, Africa. You can do it. We believe in you.
Yeah, just before I get to this question, there was I attended a bunch of online events that World Beyond War organized. That's actually how we met about
absolutely
about what's going on in Africa. And you had a very interesting story, a metaphorical story about why we get involved in the peace movement and World Beyond War's mission. I was wondering if you could share that story, because it was quite interesting.
Yeah, it's because my profile picture most of the time is a hummingbird, and people are always asking, "What do you have this hummingbird everywhere?" It's because there is a story saying that one day there was a huge fire in the forest, and every animals were running away trying to escape the flames, and it was kind of a panic, and everybody was running except the hummingbird. He was going to the river, get some water, just a little bit with his tiny beak, was going to the fire and drop the water. And he was back to the river, the fire, the river, the fire. So the animals stop and say, "Hey, you fool, what are you doing? You're not going to stop anything with your little drop of water." And he said, "Yeah, probably I won't, but I try." And I think it represents well what we're doing at World Beyond War. We're not going to save the world. We are not superheroes, but we try very hard.
Fantastic. And before I let you enjoy your weekend, we usually end the program with a questionnaire done by you know this, coming from France, Marcel Proust, and later the popular broadcaster Bernard Pivot, and then later my hero James Lipton of Inside the Actors Studio did this questionnaire. So Marion, it's your turn to do the questionnaire. So Marion,
okay.
So Marion, what is your favorite word?
My favorite word. It's it's a French,
and it can be in other languages. So
so it's gonna be a French word, and it's a saperlipopette. I like this word very much. it means
Yeah.
it doesn't mean anything actually. It's really what you say. It's an exclamation when you're surprised, or where when you and the kids laugh a lot when you say it. And instead of saying shit, or you just say saperli popette, and it's way better.
Then what's your least favorite words?
My what? Sorry.
Your least favorite words. What's your least favorite words?
Oh. Hmm. Um. Torture.
Okay. And
I don't get that. I don't understand how a human being can do that. Torture is just I don't get it. Torture is terrible.
exactly. And what turns you on emotionally, what turns you on emotionally, spiritually, or psychologically? What inspires you?
Nature.
Okay.
The just looking around and seeing trees, and yeah, the sun, the moon, that there is all this around it. Yeah, it's amazing.
And then what turns you off then?
Um, Probably I would say disrespect, which is yeah, the opposite of disrespect towards nature, disrespect toward human being. When the respect is gone, nobody respect anything. This chaos, and it's scary. And so yeah, disrespect would be it.
I completely agree with you. And then what sound or noise do you love?
Of noise.
Yeah. What sound or noise do you love?
Oh, oh my, these are a complicated question. I like the sound of the water, of a river or the ocean, or and yeah, that this is a sound that I love very much.
Funny,
It appease everybody.
we've had many people on this show who say that they love the sound of like waterfalls and
Oh,
rainfalls and
great.
whatnot. So that's a very popular answer. Then, what sound or noise do you dislike then?
Oh, everything very aggressive. Um, like I always change my phone ring to have something very smooth, and the sound that make me jumps. I hate that. I hate that. Even for my phone ring.
Oh, I can imagine. And then yeah, and then having been to Congo once, like yeah, all that honking noise and stuff like that. Yeah, it's annoying. And then what profession? Oh yes, and then yeah, what's your favorite curse words?
My favorite curse word. I spent some times, like we said, in Quebec, and so tabarnak is a very good one. When you say it, you put everything out. Tabarnak, that's a good one.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. And then what profession, if you weren't doing all the peace activism and peace active advocacy that you do, so what profession, if you weren't doing yours, would you love to do?
Before I did that, I was a costume designer, and it's my second passion. I loved it very much, and I still do sometimes a little things on the side. So yeah,
Oh,
it's my
fantastic.
it's my other thing.
Oh, fantastic. And then what profession would you absolutely not want to do under any circumstances?
Military. I couldn't.
Yeah, here on that. And if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say as you arrive at the pearly gates, or whatever is your vision of the afterlife? And even if you're an atheist, please do answer this question.
Um, I think I think it would be a very simple conversation, and because I would present myself to him as a hummingbird, and so he would say, "Thank you for what you did, and you can go." I hope that he's gonna say that.
Alrighty. Well, we were joined. Well, well, we were joined on this edition of One Plus One, our All Things Africa edition, with Marion Transetti, who is the coordinator of World Beyond War's Senegal chapter of World Beyond War's Senegal chapter. Marion, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the program, and I hope that this will be the first of many conversations. And until then, you have a very great weekend, and you give my best to the World Beyond War team.
Thank you very much for today. And yes, we'll meet again in the future for sure. Thank you very much.